Alright, it's been a little while now. Let's see how my debut video went over with the press. Seth is a two-dimensional, unlikable character that adds nothing to the plot. Welcome to NDA, a show where I misuse words to sound smart. So obviously this isn't a real newspaper. I'm the most interesting person I've ever met. But as long as we're segueing into the topic of the video, let's talk about what makes a character interesting. So Jesse Schnell wrote in The Art of Game Design, a book of lenses, that in order to make great gameplay, there are 4 key concepts a game should instill in the player: modeling, focus, imagination, and empathy. Now each of these elements are super important to every game, and each one could be the core of a game by itself, but today we're just going to talk about the last one, empathy. The ability to spark an empathic response is one of the most amazing strengths of video games. See, humans have this mind-blowing ability to put themselves in someone else's shoes, to imagine or simulate feeling what other people feel in their own unique situations. It's crazy! So okay, obviously in order to play a game you need to take control of the main character, like whatever, right? That's like the most basic thing about games. Well, shut up, because it's amazing! Movies can't do that, so games have this whole extra way of conveying things to you that other media doesn't have, and it has 2 huge advantages. The first is that emotional conveyance can be just as effective as level design or narrative at telling the player what to do. Sure, a game can give you an objective in the story or funnel you with its level design, and you'll probably go the right way. But what if someone you care about is in danger? Or there's an enemy you really hate and you're excited to confront? You'll beeline to those things even in a big open field. That's emotional conveyance. It's awesome! The second advantage is that games offer escapism to the player. Movies and books do too, but it's a lot easier for games because a game asks you to come into the protagonist's world and see it through their eyes. Our automatic response is to become immersed in their world. That feeling of complete focus and immersion is referred to by psychologists as flow. It's when you get that feeling that you could just play a game for 3 days straight, and that's an enjoyable sensation. Basically, empathizing makes games fun. Get it? The problem is that it doesn't come automatically, just like combat or levels or whatever. Jump arcs. Empathy has to be deliberately designed to fit with the rest of the game. Some games don't need empathy to keep the player interested and they just kinda skip it. Some games make empathizing easy and it feels seamless. And some games try really hard to make you empathize, like so hard it hurts. And still at the end you're just kinda like, okay.
Maybe it's the depletion of the fishing stock driving them away.
So, like, what do we do? Is there some set of rules game developers can follow to make us empathize with their characters and settings? Well, if there is, I don't know it. So let's take a look at a game that sparks empathy really well and a game that doesn't, and see what's different. We're gonna start with a game that sucks at making us care and see what it is we're not supposed to do. Okay, so before we get into this, let me just say that we're not going to talk about how these games are as a whole. A game with really good characters can still come out complete garbage, and a game with really bad characters can still be really good. So now you might think I'm going to take a game people really love and spend 10 minutes telling you how much its characters blow. Yep. Life is Strange is a Telltale-style episodic adventure game from Don't Nod Entertainment, who you may remember, or not, from their only okay action-adventure game Remember Me. In the game, the player fills the shoes of Max Caulfield, a photography student at a snooty elitist private school for hipsters. You help her struggle through normal teenage stuff, like her constant horrifying visions of an apocalyptic storm, and being bullied for being a hipster by other hipsters at this hipster school. The game plays very similarly to other recent modern point-and-clicks like The Walking Dead, with the added quirk that Max can go back in time a few seconds to get a do-over on hard moral choices or solve time-limited challenges more quickly. But as cool as that is, the gameplay isn't really the focus of the game. The most effort is put into aesthetics and presentation. It uses an actually really well done painterly art style and character design to complement the narration, almost literally painting a picture of a snooty artistic school with strong undercurrents of darkness and danger. This stuff is very well represented and lends a lot of strength to the artistic feel of the game, which is appropriate for the setting and protagonist. So it seems pretty good so far, right? We have a game with an interesting story, solid gameplay, and a unique visual style. So what's the problem? How'd they drop the ball with the characters? Oh man. Where do I start?
The Daguerrean process, sir. You could barely even say that.
So, right off the bat, you'll notice that the characters talk stupid.
Now you're totally stuck in the retro zone. Sad face.
Really stupid.
You help saved my life. Welcome to the real world.
It's really stupid. It's so bad.
Pop, cultural pirate connoisseur.
Please, no more. I can't take it.
You got hella cash.
Let's go away.
You are the revolution. Yep, I'm just so fucking paranoid. I'm hella ready. Hella yes!
Please, no. Stop. Let it end.
Hey Seth, are you okay?
But hey, the game's translated from French, and lots of games have really bad dialogue and can still have really interesting, beloved characters.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
But in this case, the terrible, painful dialogue is just a symptom of the real issue. The problem is every character is an archetype, a cardboard cutout. Max is a hipster, and you start off the game in class with a bully, a virgin, and a cool adult. The best friend character is a rebel. These are classic archetypes used a lot in literature to convey certain elements of a character's personality. They're definitely not intrinsically bad, but in this case, they really just make the characters shallow and predictable. The characters never really show more depth than their archetype defines. What you see is what you get. Okay, so that's the first thing. But wait, there's more.
Sad face. I'm just a geek girl in some small town.
Anton Chekhov famously said, "Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on a broken glass." This is one of the most common rules of thumb in narrative writing. Show, don't tell. Or as the Robot Devil puts it,
"You can't just have your characters announce how they feel. That makes me feel angry."
It's a rule that's incredibly useful for revealing character. What if you want your audience to know that a character is a talented photographer? Maybe you do it like this.
When are you gonna take it?
Sometimes I don't.
Or maybe you just have a guy say it.
You have the fever to take images.
Which one of these was more interesting? This is how all character traits are revealed throughout the game. Sometimes a character tells you something about themselves.
I consider myself a pop, cultural pirate connoisseur.
Sometimes they tell you something about someone else.
You never talk, just zone out with your camera.
A lot of the time it's redundant.
I'm so sick of people trying to control me.
Yeah, I can tell. By the way you're shooting people that are trying to control you. But thanks for saying it out loud, I guess. So take Max's bedroom, for example. This is a scene that happens in the first 20 minutes of the game, so it's a really good opportunity to show you everything about the character. The problem is, everything you might have learned about her in her room, you already got shoved in your face or said out loud to you by some Randy. Check it out. Max is a hipster.
Even Mark, Mr. Jefferson, falls for your wave hipster bullshit.
She likes photography.
You have the fever to take images.
She has a good relationship with her parents. She's introspective and feels alone.
Glad I'm not the only lonely nerd around here.
So instead of leaving her room feeling like you understand Max better, you just went in there to advance the story and nothing else. Her room is well designed to tell you all about her, but completely wasted because the terrible dialogue already told you, but stupider. But hey, at least that's over. Now we completely know the characters when we understand all their motivations and we can move on, right? Wrong.
I'm not about tearing people down, Max.
Just for the record, characters acting irrationally can be a really good storytelling mechanic, even in games. Take Spec Ops: The Line, for instance. The story hinges on Walker's loosening grip on rationality and uses that to tell a fantastic story. So it's not like it's always bad to have characters act irrationally. But that's in the hands of a good writer. So how'd they mess it up here? Well, the issue isn't that the characters are irrational. Lots of people are irrational. The issue is they betray the character we've met so far with no motivation. That turns it into a huge issue, especially if it's used as a lazy segue into a gameplay challenge. So, how about some examples? You get a big important moral choice of whether or not to pick up your phone when it rings, because if you answer your ringing phone, Chloe will resent you. For some reason.
Please, don't let your best friend get in the way, you okay?
If you report Nathan for having a gun, the principal tells you it's an accusation he takes very seriously and he's going to look into it quietly. Minutes later, Max gets a text from her mom saying the principal told her Max lied about another student. Come on, that's not serious or quiet. Nathan wants you to keep his secret quiet, so he tries to strangle you all crazy in a crowded parking lot in front of a bunch of people? That's fine. Maybe none of these are big issues by themselves, but when every character acts this way, it starts to add up. Max herself is the worst offender, and when she acts out of character, it changes the entire game. For instance, look what happens after Nathan trashes Max's room. An awesome thing to do if you're trying to hide evidence that you're a criminal.
No fucking way. This is not why I came to Blackwell. And I still have to clean all this crap up?
Are you serious? That should be an immediate concern.
After I find Kate's book.
And you're just gonna leave it there? He's probably gonna kill you. At least take a picture of it. Just let me...
Oh shit.
Nope.
Nathan
can't even take a picture of it. In a game about photography. And hey, how about that storm? You know, the one that's gonna wreck the town by the end of the week? Maybe we should tell some meteorologists about it, or like, anyone at all. Or maybe we'll collect bottles at the junkyard instead.
A cute little bottle for the taking.
You see how this is an issue? The things that seem like the biggest deals to you as the player are the things that any rational person would deal with first. Max doesn't care about them, so now you, the player, are at odds with the protagonist. That is not conducive to empathy in a game. But none of this really means anything if it's just nitpicking. I mean, you can make anything seem stupid if you just throw criticism at it long enough. The most important part of constructive criticism is the solution. The part where we discuss how these issues could have been fixed. So now, let's look at a game that has really good characters that encourage you to empathize with them, and see how they're different. So, we need a game with fantastic and lovable character design. What could possibly be better than a game about little colored squares? Thomas Was Alone is a two-dimensional puzzle platformer by game developer Mike Bithell. It was originally released in 2010, but it's seen like a dozen more releases on different platforms since then. You can probably play it on your microwave. Where do I plug? Anyways, the game puts you in control of Thomas, a little red square created by non-specific science to solve simple problems for testing purposes. Over the course of the game, you meet a bunch of other little squares, each with unique, skills. So, at first you might think that comparing this game to Life is Strange is a stupid thing to do. What could this game and this one possibly have in common? Well, there's a lot more than you'd think at first glance. Yeah, the art style and presentation is a lot different, but the focus is the same. Thomas Was Alone uses its presentation to divert all your attention to the narrative, much like Life is Strange does. And although the two obviously play very differently, the gameplay complements the narrative in the same ways. Gameplay is used in both games as a challenge leading up to a narrative payoff, so the narrative becomes the reward for finishing hard parts of the game. So with all that stuff that Thomas Was Alone and Life is Strange have in common, what is it that Life is Strange failed at that Thomas Was Alone does so well? Let's start at the top. From line number 1.
Thomas was alone. Wow. A weird first thought to have.
The characters in Thomas Was Alone are super relatable. As they've known in film for decades and literature for millennia, being able to relate to the protagonist is a huge factor in being able to empathize with them. Every character in Thomas Was Alone is tailor-made to be relatable in really simple, primal ways. They usually have one outstanding virtue, one outstanding flaw, and a goal that guides them. We understand them right away and get what they're feeling, so it's easy for their feelings to transfer to us. I guess what I'm trying to say is that all the characters are caricatures. Huh. That can't be right. Well, okay, skip that one. Moving on! So anyways, a lot of the emotional impact of Thomas Was Alone lies in its presentation. Little squares aren't super great at showing emotion. It basically comes down to size, shape, color, and jump arc, I guess. And all of these aspects are used in Thomas Was Alone to convey character, but still, if the characters were just like in a vacuum, you probably wouldn't get any kind of like story out of it. Just a bunch of dancing squares.
Think, damn it, think.
So the game relies on other tools to convey the story to you, and that's where it really shines. The music and level design never fail to get their point across, but the real star of the game is the narrator. The portrayal he gives their innermost thoughts is beautifully acted and never feels tacky or meaningless. Even the stupid lines,
"Fear not, my skinny friends, for I am Claire, and I will save you,"
give you insight into the characters you might not otherwise have had. Basically, the way you're told everything about the characters and dialogue is really well done. Okay, that's stupid, but whatever, I'm powering through. I must make a point somewhere in this video. Thomas Was Alone has a huge cast of characters, and that's an easy stumbling block for a lot of writers. It's hard to juggle half a dozen or more characters all the time and still make each one feel unique. Obviously, if you can't even tell the characters apart, you're not going to empathize with them very easily, and any emotional impact of their stories will be lost. Thomas Was Alone never falls over this block though. Each character has their own arc, and when they all come together at the end, the payoff is super satisfying. The way you see each character grow and eventually betray their original personality—
Stop! Stop!
Well, obviously you saw that one coming. We've made our point here. Thomas Was Alone and Life is Strange use a lot of the same techniques and break the same rules. So what gives? How come it's okay for Thomas Was Alone to break all these rules and I'm tearing Life is Strange a new one for it?
Well, even though the rules they broke were the same, one game knew what it was doing and did it well, and the other didn't. So let's go through that stupid list one more time and see how both games treated it.
Life is Strange uses simple character designs to show a character's personality all at once. It makes each character easy to get a handle on at a glance, but in the end, characters are held back by their archetypes. They're never allowed to act outside of them, and when they do, it's because they're, being just so stupid. And it causes two other problems. First of all, we don't need to understand a character at first glance. Depth of character comes from that feeling of discovering more about someone the more time you spend with them. And second, applying a two-dimensional label to every character stunts their growth. If they can't become something more than what you see at first, how are they going to grow as characters? They're not. Just cut them out of cardboard, no one will even know. Thomas Was Alone does the opposite. Every character starts with a two-dimensional label, but you begin with these assumptions because it's how the characters see each other. The further you go, the more depth you see, until finally the labels don't seem like they tell you anything at all. Instead of using stereotypes to confine the characters, the game uses them as a starting point for their journeys, and when they finally break their molds, it makes sense in the context of the story. So obviously in both games you're told a lot of things, but the technique is used in really different ways, and the intent of the writers is different at its core. In Life is Strange, dialogue is used to explain character traits that are hard to show. Basically, every time the creators couldn't figure out how to show something, they just had somebody describe it to you instead. I mean, either that or they really thought, boy, I sure am a hipster, is like a super normal thing to say. To yourself.
Glad I'm not the only lonely nerd around here.
Thomas Was Alone, on the other hand, never has a character just say a trait they have like that. Instead, the dialogue indirectly reveals their personalities. By being omnipresent in their thoughts, you see the things about them that they wouldn't tell the other characters, and how they contradict with the things they say out loud. Instead of lazily describing the characters to you, the narration is used to challenge the way you thought about the characters on the outset, and show how they're growing.
So this one's pretty obvious, but let's see what the deal is anyways.
In Life is Strange, the characters are slaves to the story. Their personalities change to fit the role they need to fill, until everyone has these muddy personalities that you can't get a pin in. It's really hard to relate to people whose attitudes are constantly changing for the sake of story progress. It comes back to the first problem. If the only thing I can be sure about someone is that they're a douche because everything else is always changing, why should I care about them? They're just a douche as far as I'm concerned, so whatever. But in Thomas Was Alone, characters change by the end of the game in ways that are true to their core characters. They have an arc. By the end of the game, they're different from how they were at the beginning, and not because they're acting out of character. The narration really helps here. It's easy to see why the characters have changed so much when we see their journey all the way to their final decisions from inside their own heads. So this is what it all really comes down to. Even though the two games broke the same rules, we saw the characters in each game through a different lens, and that made all the difference. Life is Strange shows you its characters through an external lens. We see a lot of interesting characters, but we only ever see them the way a stranger would. Their cool kid dialogue is never subtle enough to leave anything to the imagination, but never tells you anything you couldn't tell by looking at them. It makes them shallow. Their personalities can be boiled down to like a pop culture meme and a list of crap they like. It shows you who they are on the outside, the things anyone who ran into them at Hot Topic could tell, and then calls that a fully fleshed out character. Thomas Was Alone, on the other hand, shows the characters through an internal lens. Because the character designs are so simple, nothing can be told about them through their looks, their animations, or their interactions. Even their voices are all the same thanks to the narrator. That means that the only things we can use to tell them apart are who they are on the inside. That's what makes them brilliant. Instead of seeing them the way an outsider would, we see each character the way they see themselves. We see their strengths and weaknesses, their fears and insecurities, and we see all of it without them telling us anything directly. So when they change and grow, it means something to us because we saw it happen from the inside out, and we were there every step of the way. Life is Strange has character growth too. I mean, I guess, but it doesn't make any sense. Why? Just why? And that's really the heart of the discussion. Being attached to a video game character, unlike in other art forms, is a lot like becoming attached to a real person. Sure, you can form a lasting relationship with someone just by being around them enough or being told things about them, but that kind of relationship tends to be kind of fragile. One of the greatest relationship builders is shared goals, which is also one of video game narrative's greatest strengths. We work with the protagonist from the beginning of the game to the end of the game for everything we earn, and that builds an attachment in a way not much else can. But if we don't care about the protagonist's goals because the protagonist is just a stranger to us, why keep playing?
So how can games make us care? Allow me to push my theory. We care when we know the characters, we understand them, and we want what they want.
If any of these are missing, the characters become hard to care for. In other art forms, each of these steps is flexible. You can end up with a strong protagonist without each one. But it's different with games. Partly that's because in other art forms, the audience is expected to get to the end. So a character that was boring or unlikable for the first 3/4 of a movie or whatever can redeem themselves. Video games don't have that luxury. Only 1 out of every 10 players of a game will finish it. This is especially true for Life is Strange because it's episodic. Like, maybe the characters will get super awesome in episode 3, but it's too late. No one wants to play a game for 2 months where the characters suck because maybe in the 3rd month the characters will just grow a personality. That's dumb, and partly we need all 3 of those things because we take direct control over the protagonist. If any of them are missing, why should we do what they want? Why should we care? We can just play a different game where we share the characters' goals or, you know, like them at all. In Life is Strange, we know the characters. We're told about them constantly, but we don't understand them. Their reactions to things going on are nonsensical, their outlooks change to fit the story, and their motivations don't exist. Maybe that works for the story, but it doesn't work as a video game. And we don't want what they want. We, as the players, want to deal with the goals the game has given us. We want to solve the mysteries it presents us, confront the enemies, save the citizens. Life is Strange shows us that Max could do these things, and then tells us she doesn't want to, and instead makes a game of texting friends and eating at diners, and wants us to care about its characters more because we did these things. It doesn't work. In Thomas Was Alone, we know the characters from the outset. Much like in Life is Strange, they're easy to grasp, but the game doesn't stop when we get to know them. We keep going, see their thoughts, their desires, their talents, and their fears until we understand them like they understand each other. And when the game gives us a goal, it's the same one the characters want, and we're happy to see it through with them. So when the characters become desperate for their goals, so do you. And it literally makes the game more fun. You feel like you've been on an adventure instead of feeling like you did some chores. You feel like you saw a story instead of feeling like you went to school. And in the end, instead of feeling like you talked to a bunch of strangers, you feel like you made friends. And I think that's the game I'd rather play. Okay, so I'm gonna level with you. For a little bit there, I was seriously perplexed. I played Life is Strange knowing nothing going in except that it was like a cool new adventure game. When I started making progress and realized that I literally couldn't tell if some parts of the story were a joke, I went online to see what the deal was. What I found was that it was getting insane amounts of praise. People were deconstructing the plot, coming up with theories, pointing out foreshadowing. They were just eating it up. And let me tell you, I've had a lot of schooling in literature, storytelling theory, art analysis, you name it. And the conclusions those things led me to were so different from everything I read that I started to think something was wrong with me. Like, I didn't actually understand storytelling at all. And then while I was on the toilet, I had an epiphany. Here are some other games that have a huge amount of fans that are really into the story. Now, I'm not trying to get down on you if you're a fan of one of these, but I want you to take a serious, long look at the games in here that you've played and really think about the stories and the characters. Pause the video if you have to. So, if you really take off your nostalgia goggles, try to ignore everything else about these games, and just think about the narrative by itself, objectively, they're basically all gibberish. None of this crap makes any sense. Some of the best video game stories of all time are barely at the level of bad fan fiction. But ultimately, it doesn't matter because we're not just playing a story. We're having an experience as a whole that the narrative is only part of. And because of that, a lot of the time, storytelling is completely ignored in the medium, and that's really sad. What I'm trying to say is that Life is Strange's characters don't even come close to comparing to great characters in other art forms, but that's okay, because it isn't one of those art forms. Life is Strange is a video game, and it does a good enough job working with the tools that medium provides that people like the game anyways. So yeah, maybe Life is Strange's characters are garbage, but at least it tried, and that puts it miles ahead of most game stories. I don't think that this is the final destination of story-based games, and I do think that the industry can do a lot better than this. But maybe, just maybe, Life is Strange is an important stepping stone on the road to games being a respected narrative art form. There, I think I've made my point pretty concisely, and it only took me, geez, 26 minutes? I gotta go to bed! Thanks for watching my thing, sorry it was so long. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't, comment if you want. There's a button here to subscribe, and if you still want to support me, you can whitelist me on Adblock. I also got some more buttons here. This one goes to a Facebook page I might remember to update, and this one goes to my Twitter that I think I figured out how to use. One more PS. Life is Strange Episode 3 came out while I was still screwing around with this video, and I did play it for the sake of the video. I've already talked too long, but long story short, it was better. I put a little write-up down there in the description if you care.
I wonder if that was better. Say something. No two-dimensional person would ever